He didn't pick up the phone. Not the first call. Not the 7th. Not the 14th. Naomi Carrington stood outside the iron gate of her own home, in the middle of a Chicago winter storm, her fingers going numb around her phone, watching through the window as her husband held another woman like she was something precious, like she was the one who deserved to be kept warm. In her coat pocket was an ultrasound photograph. 8 weeks. A heartbeat the size of a whisper. She had driven 40 minutes in freezing rain to tell him he was going to be a father. Instead, she watched him be a husband to someone else. If that had been you standing at that gate, what would you have done? Before we go any further, if stories like this hit you somewhere deep, somewhere real, please subscribe to this channel right now and hit that notification bell. Every week we bring you stories about love, betrayal, survival, and the kind of choices that reveal who people truly are. Drop a comment below telling me what city or country you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels, and if it moves you like it, share it. Let's begin. The pregnancy test had been sitting in Naomi's purse for 6 days before she finally made the appointment. She hadn't wanted to know. Knowing would make it real, and real meant she would have to decide something. She had been living in the space between deciding and pretending for so long that the space had started to feel like a home of its own, cramped, airless, but familiar in the way that only painful things can be. Dr. Patricia Webb's office was on the 14th floor of a building on Michigan Avenue. It smelled like lavender and antiseptic, the kind of place where serious news got delivered in a soft voice, with a box of tissues already positioned within reach. Naomi noticed the tissues the moment she sat down. She had been noticing things like that lately. Exit signs. Which chairs faced the door. How long it took for someone to answer when she spoke. "You're 8 weeks along," Dr. Webb said. "Not congratulations." Not yet. The doctor had known Naomi long enough to read the room. Naomi sat with that number for a moment. 8 weeks. She had been sleeping in the guest room for 9. The ultrasound took less than 4 minutes. The technician, a young woman named Bree, who wore silver earrings, shaped like small moons, turned the screen so Naomi could see. And there it was. Not yet a person, not even really a shape. But the sound coming through the speaker was unmistakable. A fast, rhythmic flutter, determined, certain of itself in a way Naomi had not been in a very long time. She did not cry in the office. She thanked Dr. Webb, took the photograph, folded it carefully into the interior pocket of her coat, close to her chest, and walked out into the Michigan Avenue wind without her scarf properly fastened. She cried in the parking garage, 3 floors down, in a corner near the stairwell, with her forehead pressed against the cold concrete wall, the kind of crying that doesn't make much noise because it doesn't need to, kind that has been building for months. When it was over, she wiped her face, got in the car, and drove toward Evanston. She had rented the house 6 weeks ago, a quiet place on a tree-lined street with a porch wide enough to sit on in the summer and a second bedroom she had been telling herself was for a home office. She had not told Vincent about it. She had not told anyone. The lease was in her name only, paid from a savings account she had opened 3 years into the marriage, back when some quiet part of her had already begun to prepare for the possibility that things would not hold. The separation papers were in a folder on the kitchen counter. She had not signed them yet. She kept telling herself she needed one more conversation with him. One real one. The kind they used to have when they were still 2 people who genuinely surprised each other. She sat at that kitchen counter for 2 hours. She made tea she didn't drink. She reread the papers twice. She looked at the ultrasound photograph for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called Vincent. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. She called again. Same. She tried his personal line, not the one his men answered, but the number she had been given on their 3rd date, the one he said was only for her. 4 rings. Voicemail. Naomi looked at the clock. It was 6:47 in the evening. She knew his schedule. She had memorized it the way you memorize the habits of someone you are no longer sure you trust. He should have been home. He was almost always home by 6 on Tuesdays. She pulled on her coat. She picked up the folder with the papers. She put the ultrasound photograph back in her interior pocket. She was going to tell him in person. The drive from Evanston to the estate took 43 minutes in light traffic, longer in the snow that had started falling somewhere around Wilmette. Naomi drove carefully. She had always been a careful driver. Vincent used to tease her about it. She came to complete stops at stop signs, even when there was no one else at the intersection. He found it charming once, back when he still found things charming. The estate was in a private stretch north of the city. Old money architecture, new money security. The iron gate at the front was the kind that took a code or a call from inside. Naomi had the code. She had always had the code. Even now, even after everything, she still had it. She pulled up and stopped. She did not enter the code immediately. Through the falling snow, through the iron scrollwork of the gate, she could see the front windows of the house, lit warm and gold. Curtains in the main sitting room were partially open. She saw Vincent first. She recognized him, before she fully understood what she was seeing, the way you recognize someone you have shared a bed with, something in the posture, the particular way he held his shoulders. He was standing near the fireplace. He had a glass in one hand. And then she saw who he was holding with the other. The woman was not someone Naomi recognized, which was its own kind of strange cruelty. She was tall, lighter-skinned, wearing something that caught the firelight. Vincent had one arm around her waist. He was saying something. He was smiling a specific smile that Naomi had known, the one reserved for moments when he thought the world had arranged itself to please him. He looked at that woman the way he used to look at Naomi. Naomi sat in the car, with the engine running for a long time. Long enough that her breath fogged the windshield. Long enough for the snow to start settling on the hood. Then she picked up her phone. She called him. She watched through the gate as he glanced at his phone screen. He looked at it for exactly 1 second. Then he set it face down on the mantel and turned back to the woman. Called again. He did not move toward the phone. She called a third time, a fourth. By the 7th call, she was not thinking clearly anymore. She was just pressing the button, watching him stand there, watching him not move, watching him make the choice over and over again in real time, with about 50 yards of snowy driveway between them. 14 calls. She counted later, when she was able to count things again. He ignored everyone. At some point, her hand found the ultrasound photograph through the fabric of her coat. She pressed it there. She does not remember deciding to do it. Her hand just went there on its own. She put the car in reverse. She did not enter the gate code. She did not get out of the car. She did not knock or yell or throw anything, though later she would think about the throwing and understand why some women do it. She drove away from the gate. She drove north, back toward Evanston in the snow. She was not crying. She was past that. She was somewhere on the other side of crying, in a quieter and more dangerous place. The kind of place where decisions get made and carried out without a lot of feeling attached to them. She had driven maybe 4 miles when the car began to slow. Not from the weather. The roads were bad, but passable. Car just slowed, like something being taken from her. The dashboard lit up, all at once, a panel of warnings she had never seen before, and then the engine cut out completely, and the car rolled to a stop on the shoulder of a road that had no streetlights and no other cars visible in either direction. Naomi sat in the dark and the silence for about 3 seconds. Then she heard the first car door open behind her. She checked her mirrors. 2 vehicles had pulled up without headlights, which meant they had been running without headlights, or they had killed them before she noticed. And either way, that meant they had been there before her car stopped. They had been waiting. Her phone had 1 bar of signal. She hit call on Vincent's number out of reflex, knowing, even as she did it, that he would not answer. That he was still standing in that firelit room, with his arm around someone else. The call connected to voicemail in 2 rings. She did not leave a message. She looked at the men approaching, 3 of them on her side. More movement by the second vehicle. She could not see faces, but she could see how they moved, careful, coordinated, no hurry, which was somehow worse than hurry. Naomi Carrington was not a woman who froze. She had not always known that about herself. It was one of the things the marriage to Vincent had revealed, not the versions of herself she had expected to discover, but the ones underneath those. The ones that only came up when things got bad enough. She popped the door and ran, not away from them, away from the road, into the tree line, where the snow was deep and unpacked, and the darkness was complete. She heard shouting behind her. She heard feet in the snow, closer than she wanted them to be. She ran until her lungs burned, and then she kept running. She took off her coat, the coat with the ultrasound photograph in the pocket, and she left it caught on a branch. Deliberate. She pulled the scarf from around her neck and left it on a low bush 50 yards further. She knew even then, even in that moment, that she was leaving markers. That, if anyone came looking, they would need something to follow. She ran until she couldn't run anymore, and then she found a place to hide, and she got and she listened. She could hear them searching, not closest enough to find her. Not yet, but they were patient. By the time the sky began to lighten in the east, the sounds of searching had stopped. The snow had covered most of the tracks. Naomi was wet through and cold in a way that had gone past shivering into something steadier and more frightening. And somewhere back on that road, in a car that someone had deliberately disabled, was the folder with the separation papers. And on the passenger seat, where she had left it when she got out to run, was everything else. Her purse, her ID, her phone, which had died somewhere in the woods. She was gone before sunrise, just like the title said. She had not planned for it to happen this way, but then she had not planned for most of this. Back at the estate, Vincent's evening was winding down. The fire was lower. The woman whose name, he believed, was Camille, and whose presence in his home had been his single sustained act of self-deception for the better part of 5 months, had fallen asleep on the couch. He was standing at the window with a drink he had stopped tasting an hour ago. His phone showed 14 missed calls, all from Naomi. He stared at that number for a long time. 14. He had a rule about phones, about attention. He did not look at his phone when he did not look at his phone. That was the rule he had told himself. The rule he had turned into a kind of principle so it would feel less like a choice and more like a policy. 14 calls. He almost called back. He had his thumb on her name. Then Camille shifted on the couch and made a small sound in her sleep, and Vincent put the phone face down on the windowsill and stood there until he felt more like himself again. He did not call back. He went to bed. By morning his men were calling him. Not Naomi. Not a personal call. His security detail using the emergency line. He was in the car within 4 minutes of the first call, still putting on his jacket, his driver already moving before the door fully closed. When he got to the car on the shoulder of that unlit road, it was 6:15 in the morning. The snow had stopped. The sky was that flat gray that comes just before real daylight. His men the vehicle had already established that it had been deliberately disabled a remote kill on the ignition system, professional work, and had found what she had left on the passenger seat. He picked up the folder first. He did not open it. He picked up the ultrasound results second. The paper was thick, medical grade. Her name was printed across the top. Naomi Elaine Carrington. The date, the doctor's name. He unfolded it. He saw the image. He saw the measurements. He read the words at the bottom of the page, the clinical language that translated into something very simple. 8 weeks. Viable heartbeat detected. Vincent Carrington stood on the shoulder of a snow-covered road at 6:15 in the morning and held a photograph of his unborn child in his hands and understood, in a way that arrived not gradually but all at once, what he had done. Not just last night, not just the 14 calls, all of it. He had been building an empire, and somewhere in the building, he had left his wife outside the gate. The folder slipped from his other hand. He didn't pick it up. The wind moved the paper slightly. He didn't notice. He was looking at the ultrasound. He was looking at his child. And Naomi was gone. Vincent did not go back inside the estate. He stood on that road for longer than any of his men were comfortable with. They knew better than to speak. They had worked for him long enough to recognize the difference between Vincent Carrington thinking and Vincent Carrington braking. And right now, in the gray early light with the ultrasound paper in his hand and his wife's empty car sitting crooked on the shoulder, it was close enough to the second thing that nobody moved. Finally, Marcus, his head of security, a broad-shouldered man from the South Side, who had been with Vincent for 11 years and had seen things that would have retired a lesser person, stepped forward and said quietly, "We need to move. Standing here doesn't help her." Vincent folded the ultrasound photograph. He put it in his interior jacket pocket. He picked up the folder from the ground, tucked it under his arm without looking at it, and walked back to the car. "Find her," he said. That was all. 2 words. But Marcus had heard Vincent give orders in a lot of different registers over the years, and this one sat differently. This one came from somewhere beneath the usual authority. This one came from a man who understood, maybe for the first time in a long while, that he had something to lose that could not be replaced. By 8 in the morning, Vincent had every available resource pointed in one direction. His men fanned out across the North Shore corridor. He called in favors from 3 different Chicago PD contacts carefully, without explaining why, because explaining why meant explaining Naomi, and explaining Naomi meant explaining the 14 calls he hadn't answered. He was not ready to say that out loud to anyone yet. The technical team pulled the car's data. The kill signal on the ignition had been sent remotely, professionally executed, using a frequency jammer that required specific knowledge of the vehicle's make and model. This was not opportunistic. Someone had known what car Naomi drove. Someone had known the route she would take. Marcus brought him that report in the kitchen of the estate, setting it on the table with both hands. The way you set down something you are not sure will be received calmly. Vincent read it twice. Then he looked up. How long had they been monitoring the car? We don't know yet. Estimate, Marcus exhaled slowly. The jammer calibration takes time. Somebody did prep work. Minimum weeks. Vincent set the report down. He was very still for a moment. Kind of still that was not peace. Weeks, he repeated. Yes, while she was driving around in that car. While she was going to, he stopped. He pressed the heels of his hands against the table edge. Where's the technical team now? On it. Tell them weeks isn't good enough. I want a date. I want to know the first day someone put eyes on her movements. Marcus nodded and left. Vincent stood alone in his kitchen. Coffee maker was still running from earlier. The smell of it filled the room. He looked at the counters, the cabinets, the ordinary geometry of a morning that had no right to look normal, and he thought about Naomi driving north in the snow the night before, calling him 14 times. And he thought about where his phone had been and what his hand had been doing when it buzzed. He walked to the sink. He ran cold water over both wrists. He stood there until his breathing evened out. Then he went to find Camille. She was still in the sitting room. She had woken up and tidied herself with the careful efficiency of a woman who had learned to be presentable quickly in uncertain situations. She was standing near the window with a cup of coffee when he came in, and she looked at him with an expression he had not seen on her face before. Not the easy warmth she usually offered him. Something tighter. Something that looked almost like guilt. Your wife, she said before he could speak. Not a question. My wife is missing, Vincent said. Someone took her off a road last night, disabled her car and took her. He watched Camille's face. You don't look surprised. I heard your men talking in the hallway this morning. You heard them through a closed door. The walls in this house are not as thick as you think. He studied her. Camille Duval was 31. She had come into his world through a business introduction. 8 months ago, a contact of a contact. Some tangentially connected to a legitimate real estate venture he had used as a front for 3 years. She was composed, well-read, careful with what she revealed. He had found that attractive. He had mistaken careful for honest. I need to ask you something, he said, and I need you to understand that however you answer, it will determine what happens next. Not to you. To the situation. Do you understand? Camille put her coffee cup down. Ask. Did you know Naomi was pregnant? The silence that followed was maybe 4 seconds long. 4 seconds is not very long in most situations. In this one, it was long enough for Vincent to watch something move behind Camille's eyes, a calculation. Then a decision. Then something that looked like exhaustion at having to make the decision at all. Yes, she said. The word landed like a stone in standing water. Everything rippled outward from it. How? I saw her medical paperwork. It was on the table in the foyer one evening when I arrived. I don't think she had meant to leave it there. She must have put it down and forgotten it. I only saw it for a moment when, 3 weeks ago, Vincent took one step toward her, just one. But his posture changed completely, and Camille did not step back, which he noted, which told him something about her nerve that he filed away even in the middle of everything else. 3 weeks ago, you knew my wife was carrying my child, he said. His voice was very even. That was the most frightening version of his voice, and most people who had worked around him long enough knew it. And you said nothing to me. No. Why? Camille looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, because I tried to warn her instead. Vincent's jaw tightened. Explain that sentence. I left a message for her. Anonymous, I told her to be careful, that the people around you were not all trustworthy, that she should vary her routes and not keep regular schedules. She paused. I did not tell her about us. I could not do that to her. But I tried to give her something. An anonymous warning, Vincent said slowly. To my pregnant wife. From the woman sleeping in my house. Yes, and you thought that was enough. Camille's voice did not waver, but something in her face did. I thought it was what I could do without. She stopped. Started again. I was not in a position to do more. You were in a position to tell me. And what would you have done? She said it plainly. Not aggressive. Just a question that had an answer neither of them liked. Would you have believed a threat you couldn't see? Would you have changed anything? Vincent did not answer that. He could not answer that honestly, and he knew it. He turned and walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. Without turning around, he said, Don't leave this house. Don't call anyone. If I find out you've made any contact with the outside in the next 6 hours, I will assume you are part of what happened to her. Camille said nothing. He left. The next revelation came at 11:40 in the morning from a man named Dennis Holt, who had driven for Naomi for 2 years, and who was currently sitting in a chair in Vincent's study with both hands pressed flat on his knees and the expression of someone who had made a decision they can no longer unmake and is now living inside the consequences. Dennis was 44. He had a daughter, Carrie. He had a daughter named Kezia who was 16 and attended a charter school in Hyde Park on a partial scholarship that had been quietly arranged through one of Vincent's legitimate foundations, a fact that Dennis knew and Vincent had always thought of as a form of loyalty insurance rather than anything more sinister than that. He had not until this moment considered what that insurance looked like from Dennis's side. They contacted me 6 weeks ago, Dennis said. He was not looking at Vincent. He was looking at his hands. A man called me on my personal phone. He knew Kezia's name. He knew her school schedule. He described her coming out of the building on a Tuesday afternoon in enough detail that I understood he had been there. He had been watching her. Marcus was in the room. 2 other men were in the room. Nobody spoke. He told me what he wanted, Dennis continued. Her routes, her schedules, which appointments she kept and when. The security rotations around the estate. He didn't want. He told me specifically he didn't want anything that would get Mrs. Carrington hurt. He said it was just information, that it was about Mr. Carrington's business, not about her. But you knew better, Marcus said. Dennis looked up at that. His eyes were red at the rims. I didn't know what I knew. I kept telling myself it was just information. That she would be fine. That nothing would happen to her. His voice cracked on the last sentence, and he pressed his lips together and waited until he had control of it again. They threatened my daughter. They told me exactly what they would do to her. The room was very quiet. Vincent had not sat down since Dennis started talking. He was standing by the window, and he had not moved, and he had not spoken, and nobody in that room could read what was happening behind his face, because he had closed everything off behind something flat and focused. Who contacted you? Vincent said. He didn't give me a name the first time. The second time he slipped. He answered a call while I was still on the line and I heard someone address him. The name was Darius. The air in the room changed. Marcus turned his head slightly toward Vincent. The two other men exchanged a look. Vincent stepped away from the window. He walked to the desk, opened the bottom left drawer, and removed a folder that he set open on the desk surface. Inside was a photograph surveillance quality, grainy, a few years old, but recognizable. A man in his early 40s with a lean face and close-cropped hair, captured mid-stride on a Chicago street corner. He turned the folder so Dennis could see it. Is this him? Dennis looked at the photograph for 3 seconds. I never saw the man who contacted me, only heard his voice. Then it doesn't matter. Vincent closed the folder. You can go. Dennis blinked. I'm not going to do anything to you, Dennis. Vincent said it without emotion. Not reassurance, not threat, just fact. You have a daughter. Someone used that against you. And I understand exactly how that works because I have used it against other people. He picked the folder back up. Go home. Don't talk to anyone. If your daughter's school calls you today about anything unusual, you call Marcus directly. Dennis stood up slowly, like a man whose legs had forgotten what they were for. He nodded once. He left. When the door closed, Marcus said Darius Serrano. Darius Serrano, Vincent confirmed. Marcus let out a breath that was not quite a word. He moved to the desk and looked at the closed folder. We were told he died in the fire 3 years ago. The warehouse on Loomis. We were told a lot of things 3 years ago. You believed it. I chose to believe it. There's a difference. Vincent picked up his phone. Pull everything we have. Every piece of information we collected on the Serrano operation before we dismantled it. Financial records, personnel, properties, contacts, family connections. Everything. That's going to take, then start now. Marcus moved toward the door. Vincent stopped him. The sister, Vincent said. Darius had a sister. She would be early 30s now. What was her name? Marcus thought for a moment. Camille. The name sat between them. Marcus turned slowly and looked at Vincent with an expression that held no satisfaction whatsoever. Because this was not the kind of moment that produced satisfaction. This was the kind of moment that produced a cold, heavy settling of understanding. Camille Duval, Marcus said carefully. Go check if she's still in the sitting room, Vincent said. She was. She hadn't moved. She was still standing near the window, though the coffee cup was gone, and when Vincent came back into the room, she turned and looked at him with that same expression from before the exhaustion, the guilt, but now he could read it correctly. Now he understood what it was. It was the face of someone who had been playing a role so long they had forgotten which parts were performance and which parts were real. Camille Serrano, he said. She closed her eyes briefly. One breath. Then she opened them. Yes, she said. Your brother sent you. Yes. To get close to me. To get inside. To find out what I kept and where I kept it. Yes. Vincent sat down. He almost never sat during a confrontation. It was a posture thing, a control thing. But he sat now because standing felt like too much effort for a moment this tired. He put his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor between his feet. How long, he said. 8 months. Since the beginning. Since the beginning. The real estate introduction. That was arranged. Yes. Everything. Not everything. Her voice shifted slightly on those 2 words. He looked up. Her face had changed again, not the calculated composure, not the exhausted guilt, but something underneath both of those. Something that cost her something to show. Darius told me what to do, and I did it. For months I did it, and then I found out your wife was pregnant. And you tried to warn her. I tried to warn her. I left the message. I told myself it was enough. She paused. It wasn't enough. I knew it wasn't enough, and I told myself it was anyway, because if I did more, if I went further, Darius would know I had broken. What does he have on you? She shook her head, not refusing to answer. More like the answer was too large for a single sentence. He's my brother. He doesn't need to have something on me. He just needs to be my brother. Vincent looked at her for a long time. Did you know they were going to take her? No. The word came out fast and hard, the first uncontrolled thing she had said. I did not know that. Darius told me the plan was only to gather information, to find what he needed, and then she stopped, regrouped. When I heard what happened this morning, I understood. that I had been lied to, that the information I provided was used to plan something I was not told about. Car, Vincent said, the route, the security gaps. You gave him all of it. Camille did not look away. Yes, you gave him everything he needed to take my wife off a road in the middle of a snowstorm. While she was pregnant, while she was coming to tell me, he stopped. He pressed his fist against his mouth for a moment. He took a breath. She came here last night to tell me about the baby. She called me 14 times, and I didn't answer because you were in my sitting room. The silence that followed had weight to it, the kind of silence that presses down on everything in a room. Camille Serrano, who had survived her family's criminal world since she was 19 years old, who had learned to keep her face still and her voice steady through things that would have destroyed less disciplined people, stood in Vincent Carrington's sitting room and looked like she might not be able to hold herself together. I didn't know she was coming, she said. I didn't know about the 14 calls until this morning. But you knew she was pregnant, yes, and you knew my men had gaps in the security rotation on Tuesday evenings. Pause before her answer was very small, but it was there. Yes. Did Darius know the pregnancy? Another pause. Smaller this time. But there. He knew, she said. Something moved across Vincent's face that was not anger exactly. Anger was something he knew how to work with. This was worse than anger. This was the face of a man absorbing the full geometry of a situation he had built through his own choices, year by year, and seeing for the first time exactly what it looked like from the outside. His mistress had known about his child before he did. His driver had been turned against his wife weeks ago. His enemy had been sitting across from him in legitimate business meetings, using his own network against him, and he had been too occupied with what he wanted to notice what was being dismantled around him. Where is your brother keeping her? He said. I don't know the location. But you know something. She hesitated. And in that hesitation, Vincent saw the last piece of the calculation she had been running, the one where she weighed her brother against a woman she had never met, a woman she had endangered, a woman who was carrying a child and had stood outside an iron gate in the snow, calling a number that didn't get answered. He has a property near the waterfront, she said finally. He mentioned it once, 2 years ago, before all of this. An industrial building he kept off the books. He said it was the one place he had that nobody connected to his old operation knew about. Where on the waterfront? I don't know exactly. South. Near the old freight yards. Vincent stood up. He was already moving toward the door when she spoke again. Vincent. It was the first time she'd used his name since the morning. He stopped, but didn't turn. Whatever Darius is planning to offer you, whatever terms he's to set, he won't keep them. He never keeps them. He doesn't want an arrangement. He wants to watch you lose something the way you made him lose everything. Vincent's hand was on the doorframe. He stood there for a moment. I already lost something, he said. I lost it when I didn't pick up the phone. He walked out. The south waterfront at midday in winter was a gray and desolate stretch. Vincent's men began quiet reconnaissance within the hour, not moving in, not making noise, just watching. Mapping. Counting. The kind of patient work that Vincent had always been good at, and that he now needed more than he had ever needed it. By 2 in the afternoon, Markness had a preliminary layout of 3 industrial properties in the target area that were listed as dormant but showed recent utility activity. They were narrowing it down. And in one of those buildings in a room with no windows and a concrete floor and a single overhead light that buzzed at irregular intervals, Naomi Carrington was waking up for the second time since they had brought her there. She was not tied. She had been surprised by that initially. Her wrists were free, her ankles were free. The door was locked from the outside, with a bolt she could hear, but couldn't reach. The room held a cot, a folding chair, a plastic water bottle, and a bucket in the corner that she chose not to look at directly. She sat on the edge of the cot. She inventoried her body the way she used to inventory a room methodically, without rushing to conclusions. Her left shoulder ached where she had hit the ground when they caught her in the woods. There was a cut above her right eyebrow that had dried and pulled tight. Her feet were still damp and very cold, but she could feel all her toes, which she understood mattered. She breathed. In through her nose, out through her mouth. Her hand went to her abdomen the way it had been going there all morning, the way it apparently did on its own now. This new instinct that had arrived with the heartbeat she'd heard in her. Webb's office. Still there, she told herself. You're still here. Both of you. She looked at the door. She looked at the walls. The ceiling. The vent in the upper corner of the far wall, too small to crawl through, but large enough that air moved through it, which meant the ventilation system connected to the rest of the building, which meant sound traveled. She filed that away. She listened. 2 guards outside the door. She could tell from the footsteps one heavier, one lighter, different rhythms. They were not moving in sync, which meant they were not talking to each other, which meant they were either disciplined or uncomfortable with each other. She filed that away too. The heavier one had stopped outside her door 3 times in the last hour. Just stopped, not doing anything, just standing there for a moment and then moving on. She had been counting the intervals, roughly 20 minutes apart. The lighter one had not stopped once. Naomi thought about that distinction for a long time. Then she stood up. She moved to the door. She knocked on it twice, not pounding, not frantic. Just 2 knocks, the way you knock on a door when you want someone to know you are a person. The heavier footsteps stopped. A pause. I need water, Naomi said through the door. Her voice was steady. She had worked to make it steady. The bottle's empty. Another pause. Longer this time. Then the bolt slid back. The guard who opened the door was maybe 23. He was large in the way that young men who are still growing into themselves are large, not yet comfortable with it. He had the look of someone who had agreed to something without fully understanding all of its consequences. He held a fresh water bottle. He held it out to her without stepping into the room. Naomi took it. She looked at his face not aggressively, not pleadingly, just directly, the way she had learned to look at people when she wanted to see what was actually there. Thank you, she said. He nodded, started to pull the door closed. What's your name? She asked. He stopped. You don't have to tell me, she said. I've been alone in here for a while. It's easier when there's a name. He looked at her for a moment. His jaw worked slightly. Then he said Ray. He closed the door. He bolted it again. Naomi sat back down on the cot. She opened the water bottle and drank half of it carefully, the way you drink when you don't know when the next one comes. She set it down. She looked at the door. Ray, she thought. 23 years old. Uncomfortable, stopping outside her door every 20 minutes, not because his orders required it, but because something in him needed to check, needed to know she was still alive in there, needed to connect the abstract task he had agreed to with the actual human being on the other side of the bolt. That was something she could work with. And then, through the ventilation duct in the upper corner, she heard a voice she did not recognize. A single sense, spoken somewhere else in the building, carried through the ductwork on a current of cold air. Tell Vincent Carrington we're ready to talk. Naomi went very still. She pressed her back against the wall beneath the vent, and she tilted her head, and she listened with everything she had, because the conversation that was being had in another room of that building was not about whether she would be freed. It was about what price her husband would have to pay to keep what was left of everything, and the terms that were being prepared for him were not the kind that left anyone with a clean exit. Daria Serrano had not survived Vincent's destruction of his family's empire by being patient. He had survived it by being willing to wait until the exact moment when the man who had taken everything from him had something he could not afford to. The voice came through the vent again. Naomi had not moved from her position against the wall. Her back was flat against the cold concrete, her head tilted up toward the ductwork, and she was breathing through her mouth in slow, controlled intervals so the sound of her own breath wouldn't interfere with what she was trying to hear. The voice belonged to a man she had not yet seen, measured, unhurried, the kind of voice that had learned a long time ago that it didn't need to raise itself to be obeyed. Make sure the line is clean before you connect, the voice said. I don't want his people tracing anything back here before I'm ready for them to find it. A second voice, younger, more tense. We sweep it every 2 hours. Sweep it again. Footsteps. Movement. Then silence for a while. Naomi lowered her chin and looked at the room around her with fresh eyes. Not the eyes of someone waiting to be rescued. The eyes of someone cataloging resources. Cot had a metal frame, tubular, welded at the corners. The welds not particularly clean, the kind of construction that looked solid, but had stress points if you knew where to apply pressure. The folding chair was aluminum, lightweight, useless as a weapon, but potentially useful as something else. The water bottle was plastic. The overhead light was recessed behind a wire cage, out of reach. But the cage was attached with two visible screws on one side and what looked like a friction clip on the other. She looked at the vent again. Too small for her body. But the ductwork itself ran somewhere, and sound traveled both directions through it. She filed everything. She did not rush. Rushing was for people who had only one idea. Ray came back at what she estimated was around 3 in the afternoon. Not because she asked for anything. He just came. Stood in the frame the way he had before and looked at her with the expression of a person who wanted to say something and hadn't figured out how to start. Naomi was sitting on the cot with her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. She looked at him and waited. "You need anything else?" he said. "I'm okay for now." She paused. "You been doing this long? This kind of work?" His jaw tightened slightly. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Try to get me talking." "I'm already talking," she said. "So are you?" That part already happened. He looked at her for a moment. Something moved behind his eyes that she recognized, not sympathy exactly, but the precursor to it. The moment before a person lets themselves feel something they've been instructed not to feel. "How far along are you?" he said. She went very still. Then she looked down at herself. She wasn't showing. Not at 8 weeks. He couldn't see it. "How do you know about that?" she said. Ray looked at the floor. "They brief us on who we're holding. So we know so we handle things appropriately." "Appropriately," she repeated. He had the grace to look uncomfortable with the word. "Yeah. So they told you I was pregnant so you'd know to be careful with me." She kept her voice even. Not angry. Just precise. "Because a pregnant woman dying in custody is a complication." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." She looked at him directly. "Ray, I want you to think about something. Not for me. For yourself. When this is over, whatever way it ends, you are going to have to live with every decision you made in this building. That's just how it works. You don't get to leave the decisions here when you walk out. Lady, I'm not asking you to open the door. I'm not asking you to do anything right now. I'm just asking you to think." Ray stood there for another moment. Then he pulled the door closed. The bolt slid home. But he didn't walk away immediately. She could hear him on the other side. Just standing there. She pressed her lips together. "Okay," she thought. "Okay." She waited until his footsteps finally moved away. Then she went to the cot and crouched down to examine the frame. In Vincent's makeshift command post 3 vehicles, parked in a lot 6 blocks from the waterfront, engines running for heat, laptops open, on the center console of the lead SUV, Marcus was putting together a picture that kept getting worse the more complete it became. The Serrano operation didn't just survive, Marcus said. He had a photograph open on the laptop screen. Personnel, properties, financial connections. It went underground. Completely. For 3 years, Darius maintained a parallel structure, smaller, tighter, but functional. He wasn't rebuilding from scratch. He was running a skeleton operation the whole time while we thought we'd finished him. Vincent was looking at the screen but not at the photograph. He was looking at the name on a financial document Marcus had pulled up alongside it. "Who is that?" he said. "Shell Company. Registered in Delaware 18 months ago. It's been receiving deposits from 4 different sources, all of which trace back through 3 layers of holding companies to Marcus stopped." He clicked to a different document. He did not look at Vincent when he said the next part. To a foundation registered under the Carrington Group. The silence in the SUV was total. Vincent turned his head slowly and looked at Marcus. "Say that again." "The money Darius has been operating on for the last 18 months is being laundered through a shell company that is receiving funds originating from inside our own financial structure." Marcus's voice was carefully flat. "Someone inside your organization has been feeding his operation. For 18 months. At minimum, Vincent got out of the SUV. He stood in the parking lot in the cold with his hands at his sides. Marcus gave him 30 seconds, then climbed out too, coming around to stand a few feet away without crowding him. How much? Vincent said. We're still calculating. The transfers are structured to stay below reporting thresholds. But the total over 18 months preliminary estimate is somewhere between 8 and 11 million. $8 to $11 million has been moving from my organization to Darius Serrano for a year and a half, and nobody noticed. The shell layers were very well constructed. Whoever built them knew our audit protocols, which means it's someone who had access to our audit protocols. Yes, which is a very short list, Marcus said. It is. Vincent turned and looked at him, not with accusation. With the focused, cold attention of a man who had built his life on understanding who people were under pressure and was now applying that skill to the person standing 3 feet away from him. Marcus met his gaze. He did not look away. He did not move. He stood there and took the full weight of that look with the stillness of a man who either had nothing to hide or was extraordinarily good at pretending otherwise. Tell me the list, Vincent said. Yumi, Leo Pratt, Sandra Voss in accounting, your attorney, Warren Shields, and 3 IT personnel who have system access but not contextual knowledge of what they'd be looking at. Leo's been with me 9 years. I know. Sandra's been with me 12. I know. You've been with me 11. I know, Vincent. A long moment passed. I'm not asking if it was you, Vincent said finally. I'm telling you that if I find out it was, I will handle it in a way that surprises you. Because you know how I handle betrayal, and what I'm telling you is it will be worse than that. He turned back toward the SUV. Start pulling financial records on all of them, starting from 18 months ago and working backward. I want the origin point. He got back in the car. His phone rang 40 seconds later. Unknown number. He answered it. Mr. Carrington. The voice was the one from Camille's descriptions. Measured, unhurried, certain of itself the way a man is certain of himself, when he has already positioned all the pieces and is simply waiting for the other player to notice. I apologize for the circumstances of our introduction. I would have preferred something more formal. Darius, Vincent said. You know who I am. I've known since this morning. A brief pause. The first indication of something that wasn't total composure. Camille, she didn't give you up voluntarily. We had already found the financial trail. A small lie. But useful. Where's my wife? Safe. Uncomfortable, I imagine, but safe. She's a remarkable woman. Her medical needs are being accommodated. Another pause, weighted differently. Congratulations, by the way, on the child. Vincent's hand tightened on the phone until the case creaked. What do you want? What I've always wanted. What you took from me. Darius's voice shifted slightly, not losing control, but revealing something underneath the control. Something old and hot. You didn't just dismantle my operation, Vincent. You burned my family. My father died in federal custody 18 months after your people handed his name to prosecutors. My uncle was killed in a prison yard. I had a cousin who was 20 years old and not involved in anything, and he died in a fire that was not an accident, in a building that your men set. A pause. I've been patient. 3 years is a long time to be patient. Your cousin's death was not authorized, Vincent said. I don't care what was authorized. I care what happened. The line was quiet for a moment. Name the terms, Vincent said. I want the Carrington Group's complete financial records. Not the clean version, the real version. The offshore structures, the shell companies, the political contacts, the law enforcement relationships, everything that keeps your operation invisible. I want it in a format I can use, and I want it within 48 hours. Vincent said nothing. In exchange, Darius continued, your wife and your unborn child will be returned to you unharmed. You have my word on that, for whatever it's worth to you. And after I hand you those records, after you hand me those records, I rebuild what you destroyed. This time without the exposure. I disappear. You continue operating at whatever diminished capacity you can manage without the protection those records provide, and we call the debt settled. You're asking me to hand you the keys to destroying everything I've built. I'm asking you to choose between your empire and your family. Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking. A beat. You have 48 hours. I'll be in touch with transfer instructions. The line went dead. Vincent sat with the silent phone in his hand. Marcus was watching him from the driver's seat without speaking. He wants the full financial structure, Vincent said. Everything. Real records, not the surface layer. Marcus absorbed this. If he gets that, he can reconstruct the Serrano network and expose ours simultaneously. Yes, Vincent set the phone down on the seat. He's not asking for money. He's asking for a weapon. What do you want to do? Vincent was quiet for a long time. Outside the SUV, the winter light was flattening toward late afternoon. The waterfront was visible from here. Gray water, gray sky, the shapes of dormant freight infrastructure against the horizon. Pull Warren Shields in, he said. Quietly. I need to talk to him about something that doesn't go through normal channels. Marcus started to ask something, and then didn't. He nodded and reached for his own phone. Warren Shields was Vincent's attorney. Had been for 14 years. He was 61 years old, silver-haired, had a practice in the Loop that served as the legitimate face of a number of financial arrangements that were not entirely legitimate. He knew more about the actual structure of Vincent's operation than almost anyone alive. He also appeared on the short list of people with access to the audit protocols. He arrived at the parking lot location 40 minutes later, in his own car, without his usual assistant. He got into the back seat of the SUV beside Vincent and looked at him with the expression of a man who had understood from the phone call that this was not a routine meeting. Talk to me about the Delaware Shell Company, Vincent said. Warren's face did not move, which was itself a kind of answer. The one receiving structured deposits from inside the Carrington Group financial system, Vincent continued. The one that's been funding Darius Serrano's operation for 18 months. Warren looked at him for a long time. His hands were in his lap. They were very still, which was wrong, because Warren Shields was a man who used his hands when he talked, had always gestured, had always been physically expressive, in a way that was almost theatrical. Stillness of his hands right now was the stillness of a man who had decided very carefully not to let his body say anything. Vincent, he said. Don't, Vincent said. Don't start with my name. Don't give me the tone. Just tell me what you did and why you did it. Warren exhaled. He looked at his hands. He looked at the window. He looked at the floor of the SUV. All the places a person looks when they are choosing which version of the truth to offer. He had material on me, Warren said finally. Personal material. Not criminal. Personal. He paused. My son. He's 28. He made some decisions 4 years ago that, if they became public, would end his career and his marriage. Darius had documentation. Photographs. He stopped again. He told me he wanted one thing. Financial access. Enough to run his operation. He said he would never expose the full structure. He said he just needed liquidity. And you believed him. I needed to believe him. So you gave a man who has my wife the keys to my financial house, because you needed to believe he wouldn't use them. Vincent's voice was very quiet. You have been funneling money from my operation, Warren, to the man who took my pregnant wife off a road in the middle of a snowstorm. For 18 months. Warren said nothing. Does he already have the records? Vincent asked. The real ones. Does he already have them? Or is that what the 48 hours is about? Warren looked up. His face was the face of a man who had arrived at the end of something and knew it. He has partial records. Enough to cause damage. Not enough to do what he claims he can do with the full set. A pause. The 48 hours is real.
He needs you to complete it.
So the threat is partially a bluff. Partially. But only partially. Yes. Vincent nodded slowly. He opened the SUV door. Get out. Vincent, I'm not going to hurt you, Warren. I'm going to deal with this situation. When it's over, you and I will have a different conversation. But right now, I need you out of this car, and I need you to go somewhere you can be found and stay there. Warren got out. Vincent closed the door. He sat for a moment. Then he said to Marcus, how many people in federal law enforcement do we have clean relationships with? Not the ones on payroll. The ones we've cooperated with legitimately on things that served both sides. Marcus considered 2, maybe 3. I need a name. Someone who has jurisdiction over organized crime financial structures. Someone who would take a meeting off the books. Marcus turned in the seat to look at him properly. Vincent. What you're describing, I know what I'm describing. If you go to federal investigators with the real records, it doesn't just take down Darius. It takes down us. Everything. Every operation. Every contact. Every arrangement we've built for 20 years. I know. You'd be looking at federal exposure, potential prosecution. Even with cooperation agreements, there's no guarantee. Marcus. Vincent's voice stopped him. She called me 14 times. She was standing outside that gate in the snow with my child, and I didn't answer because I was standing next to the woman who was feeding my enemy my own financial blood. I had 14 chances to make a different choice, and I chose wrong every single time. He picked up his phone. Give me the name. The warehouse at that moment was doing something it had not done in the previous hours. It was producing noise. Not from outside, from inside. Naomi had worked the lower left corner of the cot frame for the better part of an hour, applying pressure at the weld point and careful, consistent intervals, not trying to break it, not yet, but testing it, learning where it gave and where it held. It gave more on the left side than the right. The metal itself was a hollow tube, roughly 3/4 of an inch in diameter. Not a weapon, but a tool. She worked with her eyes on the door and her hands below the cot line. She stopped whenever she heard footsteps. She had been listening through the vent intermittently throughout the afternoon and had assembled a rough picture. Darius, she had now confirmed, the name from 2 separate overheard conversations, was operating with a core group of 6 people in the building. 2 guards on her corridor, 2 more at exterior positions. 1 person who seemed to handle technical and communications work and spent most of their time in a room she estimated was 2 corridors away, based on the sound travel. And Darius himself, who moved through the building periodically, and whose footsteps she was beginning to recognize slightly uneven, favoring the right side, possibly an old injury. 6 people. She was in a locked room with 1 point of entry. She had Ray. She had a piece of cot frame she hadn't separated yet. She had the ventilation system, which she couldn't use to escape, but could use to project sound if she needed to create confusion. And she had something else that she was still thinking through something she had overheard in the late afternoon. A fragment of conversation from the room she estimated as the communications hub carried through the duct on a cold current of air. Darius's voice, speaking to someone on a phone. And the sentence that had arrived in her room like a stone through glass? The boat is staged at Pier 7. If the exchange doesn't go the way I need it to, we move her tonight. Somewhere Carrington's people will never think to look. She sat on the cot with her hands still and that sentence turning over in her mind. Tonight. If the exchange fell through, if Vincent couldn't or wouldn't meet the terms, she was going to be moved. And moved meant a boat, and a boat meant the lake. And the lake in February meant something she did not allow herself to finish thinking about. She looked at the vent. She looked at the door. She looked at the cot frame. The overhead light buzzed and flickered once, briefly, and she noted that too. Generator, she had decided. The building was running on generator power, which meant the electrical system had a central point, and a central point meant a single switch, and a single switch meant that if someone cut the generator, the building went dark, and the electronic door bolts would either lock permanently or release, depending on how they were wired, and most cheap industrial installation defaulted to release on power failure, because that was the safety code. She did not know if this building followed the safety code, but she was going to find out. She went to the vent, and she spoke into it quietly. The way you speak into a microphone you are not sure is on. If anyone can hear me, she said, I'm in the south corridor. 2nd door from the east end. The boat is at Pier 7. She did not know if the sound would carry anywhere useful. She did not know if Vincent's people were close enough for it to matter. She went back to the cot frame, and she began, very carefully, to work the weld loose. Ray came at 6. This time he didn't have a water bottle. He just came and stood in the open door and looked at her and said, You need to know something. She stopped what she was doing under the cot and sat up carefully. Okay, they're planning to move you. Tonight, maybe. If things don't, if the call doesn't go right. He was looking past her, at the wall behind her, not at her face. I wanted you to know. Why are you telling me? He was quiet for a moment. Because you're pregnant, he said. And because I have a sister who is pregnant. And because I keep stopping outside your door, and I can't make myself stop doing that, and I don't know what that means, except he stopped. He pressed his lips together. I don't know what it means. Naomi looked at him. She thought about what she had been planning. She thought about the generator, the vent, the weld, the 40 minutes of careful work she had done on the cot frame. She thought about all of it, and then she looked at Ray's face, and she said, "It means you already know which side of this you're on. You just haven't admitted it yet." Ray stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and set something on the floor just inside the door. A small object, metal. He pulled the door closed. He bolted it. Naomi crossed to the door in 3 steps and crouched down. It was a key, not an electronic one, old-fashioned, kind that fit a padlock. She turned it over in her fingers. She looked at the bolted door. The electronic bolt wouldn't be opened by this. But she thought about what else in this building might be secured with an old padlock rather than a modern system. And she thought about the generator room, which in buildings like this was almost always secured with the cheapest lock available, because nobody was supposed to want to get in there. She stood up with the key in her palm. Outside the bolted door, she could hear Ray's footsteps moving away down the corridor. Moving away and not coming back. She had maybe 30 minutes before whoever was at the communications hub checked the corridor rotation. She pressed the key flat between both palms and felt the cut edges of it against her skin and understood that everything she had been building toward in the last hours, the patience, the observation, the small careful moves had just been handed an opening. And Vincent, at that exact moment, was sitting across a table from a federal agent named Carla Osi in a parking structure on the west side of the city, with a flash drive in front of him and his hands flat on the table, and the understanding that what he was about to do would end 20 years of everything he had constructed, and that he was going to do it anyway. Because the alternative was a boat at Pier 7, and a February lake and a wife who had called him 14 times. Carla Osi looked at the drive. She looked at Vincent. She had been in organized crime investigation for 16 years, and she had the face of someone who did not get surprised often, but was currently experiencing something in that vicinity. "You understand what this is," she said. "I built it," he said. "I know exactly what it is. If I take this, there's no—" "I know," he said. "Take it." She reached across the table and picked up the drive. And in the warehouse on the south waterfront, the lights went. The lights went out all at once. Not a flicker, not a gradual fade. One moment the warehouse was running on the flat, buzzing light of its generator system, and the next moment there was nothing. Complete darkness, the kind that has weight to it, the kind you can feel pressing against your eyes. Naomi had been ready for it. She had positioned herself at the door the moment she heard the generator's rhythm change a subtle drop in pitch, maybe 3 seconds of warning. Enough for someone who had been listening to that sound for hours and had memorized its normal cadence. When the darkness came, she was already standing with her back to the hinge side of the door, the key in her left hand, her right hand flat against the wall for orientation. She heard the bolt, not someone throwing it from outside. The bolt itself, the electronic mechanism, clicking as it lost power, cycling through its fail state, and then releasing with a sound like a small exhale. She pushed the door open. The corridor was absolute black. She kept her right hand on the wall and moved, counting steps the way she had counted everything. In the last several hours methodically, without rushing, because rushing in the dark with a concrete floor and unknown obstacles was how you fell, and falling was not something she could afford. She had estimated the generator room at roughly 40 steps down the main corridor, and then left. She had based this on the sound of the generator itself, on the vibration she could feel through the floor at certain points, and on the layout logic of industrial buildings like this one utilities near the exterior wall, away from the primary workspace. counted 38 steps and turned left. Her hand found a door frame. She felt for a padlock, found one, chest-height, cold metal. She got the key in on the second try. Her hands were steadier than she expected them to be, and the lock opened. Inside the generator room, the air smelled like diesel and hot metal. She did not need to see. She needed to find the main circuit panel and the external ventilation release, both of which she had heard through the ductwork a conversation 2 hours ago between someone she assumed was the technical person and one of the guards about resetting the ventilation bypass. People who talked about a system talked near the system. She found the panel by touch, large, mounted on the wall, the metal door slightly warm from the circuits behind it. She felt along the bottom edge until she found what she was looking for, a conduit running from the panel to the floor, and next to it, a lever handle that was either the main disconnect or the ventilation bypass. She pulled it. From somewhere deep in the building's infrastructure came a sound like a large door, opening, mechanical, groaning, the protest of something that hadn't moved in a while. Then a rush of air through the ductwork, cold and sharp, moving fast. She had no idea if that would help anything, but she had done what she could do. Now she needed to move. She got back to the corridor. She turned right, moving toward the east end of the building, away from where she had heard the most activity, toward what she had assessed as the exterior loading area based on the way sound bounced differently in that direction. Loading areas had doors. Doors had outside. She made it maybe 20 feet before someone grabbed her from behind. Not rough, controlled. One arm across her chest, one hand over her mouth, and a voice directly at her ear, barely above a whisper. Don't scream. I'm the one who gave you the key, Ray. She went still. He released the hand from her mouth, but kept the arm, guiding her rather than restraining her. This way, he breathed. Not the loading dock. They've got 2 men there. Follow me, she followed. He moved through the dark, like he knew it, which he did. He had worked this building for 3 days, had walked these corridors enough times to have them in his body. He took her through a side passage she hadn't known existed, down a half flight of stairs that were not where any sound had suggested stairs would be, and then through a door that opened into air so cold it hit like a wall. Outside, the waterfront. The February dark with the lake smell in it. Water and metal and something chemical. There's a fence line, Ray said, his voice still low. 30 yards east. There's a gap where the chain link doesn't meet the post. They knew about it and didn't fix it because it was outside the perimeter they were actually watching. Why are you doing this? She said. Because you were right, he said. About the decision. About having to live with it. She looked at him in the dark. She couldn't see his face well, but she could hear something in his voice that sounded like a person choosing something difficult over something easy, which was not the same sound as relief and not the same sound as virtue. It was something rawer than both. Thank you, she said. Go, he said. Straight east. Don't stop, she went. The chain link gap was exactly where he said it was, and she went through it sideways, with her shoulders scraping the post, and came out onto a narrow service road that ran along the water. She turned north. She ran, her shoulder hurt. Her feet were cold. Her lungs pulled in the February air, and it felt like breathing through a cloth soaked in ice water. She ran anyway, and the running felt like something she had been building toward for 12 hours. Like all the patience and stillness and quiet observation had been fuel she was burning now, and she ran until she saw headlights. 2 vehicles, moving fast along a road that should have been empty at this hour, running without lights until they weren't, and then the lights came on all at once, flooding the service road, and she threw up her arm against the brightness and stopped. The first vehicle stopped 10 feet from her. Marcus got out. He had a phone to his ear and he was talking fast into it, and then he stopped talking and just stood there looking at her for a moment with an expression she had never seen on his face before, which was the expression of a man who has been carrying something very heavy and has just been told he can put it down. I've got her, he said into the phone. He took off his jacket and put it around her shoulders. She let him. She was shaking not from cold, or not only from cold, and she pressed her arms around herself and breathed and looked at the jacket that was sizes too large for her and felt, for the first time in 12 hours, Something that was not control or observation or patience or calculation. She felt how scared she had been. It came through her all at once, the way cold comes through when you finally step into warmth by contrast, suddenly and completely. She pressed one hand against her abdomen. Still here, she thought. Still here. Vincent, she said. Marcus looked at her. He's at the waterfront. South End, Pier 7. She looked south. She could see lights down there, activity, movement, the kind of multiple vehicle convergence that meant something was already happening. Take me there, she said. Mrs. Carrington, we need to get you to a medical. Take me there, Marcus. He looked at her for a moment. Then he opened the vehicle door. Vincent had not gone to the warehouse. He had trusted Marcus to get Naomi out. What he had done instead, what he had told exactly 2 people and then executed in the 40 minutes since leaving the meeting with Carla Ose, was go to Pier, not with a team, not with backup moving in obvious formation. He had gone with 4 men on foot, spread out, invisible, because he had understood something about Darius Serrano from the phone call that he wanted to act on before federal units moved in on the warehouse and pushed Darius toward the exit he had prepared. Darius had a boat. He had told someone about the boat in a building he thought was secure, which meant he trusted the building, which meant he had not considered the possibility that information moved through ventilation systems. He would go to the boat when things broke down, and things were going to break down in the next 20 to 30 minutes because the warehouse was about to become very uncomfortable. Vincent wanted to be at Pier 7 when Darius arrived, not to kill him. That was the thing he had decided in the car on the way there. Turning it over and looking at it from different angles, the way you look at a decision you know is the right one and are still getting used to. Not for revenge, for Naomi. She had said something to him not directly. Not yet, she hadn't had the chance, but she had said it through the shape of what she had done. She had stood outside his gate in the snow. She had driven away without making a scene. She had run into the woods and left markers. She had sat in a locked room and built a plan out of nothing. She had not waited for him to fix it. She did not need him to be violent for her. She had never needed that from him. What she needed, what she had always needed, what he had failed to understand for years, was for him to be present, to see her, to answer the phone. Was at Pier 7 to make sure Darius Serrano went into federal custody alive, which was not the outcome Darius was expecting, and which would deny Darius the final version of the story he had been writing for 3 years, the one where Vincent Carrington destroyed him, and then Vincent Carrington destroyed himself in revenge, and Sis lived in the mutual ruin. Vincent was going to take that ending away from him. He was already on the pier when he heard the warehouse alarm, distant, muffled, but carrying over the water. He checked his watch. Earlier than he had calculated. Something had moved faster than expected. He pulled his coat tighter and watched the far end of the pier. 5 minutes. 7. The water moved against the pilings, with a sound like something breathing. Then he heard footsteps on the pier. Darius Serrano was not running. That was the first thing Vincent noticed. He was walking purposeful, fast, but not panicked. A man who had prepared for contingencies and was now executing one. He had 2 men with him, both large, both moving with the particular alertness of people who have been trained to notice threats and are currently noticing several. He saw Vincent at roughly 20 feet. He stopped. His 2 men moved forward slightly, instinctively, putting themselves between Darius and the figures standing alone on the pier. Vincent raised both hands to shoulder height, not in surrender, in demonstration. Look, no weapon. Just me, call them back, Vincent said. I'm not here the way you think I am. Darius was quiet for a moment. He had the look of a man running calculations fast, reassessing, checking variables. Then he said something to the 2 men and they moved back, 2 steps, not away, but back. Vincent lowered his hands. The warehouse is compromised, he said. Your people are going to be dealing with federal units in about 10 minutes. I didn't send them. I mean, I contributed to them being there, but not in the way you're thinking. Darius studied him. In the pier lights, he looked like the surveillance photograph, lean, composed. But there were things the photograph hadn't captured. Around his eyes, the tightness around his eyes, the way his posture held something that was not just vigilance, but the long accumulated weight of someone who had been angry for a very long time. You came alone, Darius said. 4 men on the service road, Vincent said. Not moving unless I say so. Why? Because I want to talk to you. We had a conversation. That was a negotiation. I want to talk. Vincent took 2 steps forward. Darius's men tensed. Vincent stopped. I'm not going to tell you I understand what I took from you. I don't understand it. I made a business decision that destroyed your family, and I made it the way I made all my decisions for 20 years, by calculating what it would cost me and what it would gain me, and not spending very much time on what it would do to the people in the path of it. He paused. Cousin, the one who died in the fire. I told you his death wasn't authorized. That's true. It is also true that I created the conditions under which it happened, and then I moved on. I did not lose sleep over it. Darius had gone very still. I'm telling you this because I'm done performing, Vincent said. I handed federal investigators the full financial structure of my operation 2 hours ago. The real one. Not a version of it. Not a selected portion everything. Because the alternative was your boat and the lake, and my pregnant wife and I have. He stopped. He pressed his hand briefly to his mouth. Then he took it away. I've made enough decisions that put my empire over the people in it. I'm done. The water moved against the pilings. That doesn't give me back what I lost, Darius said. No, it doesn't. My father died in a federal cell. Yes. You think handing over records to the same federal system. I think it doesn't fix anything, Vincent said. I think you know it doesn't fix anything. I think you have known for 3 years that nothing fixes it, and the plan you built was not actually about fixing it. It was about making me feel it. He held Darius's gaze. You wanted me to lose something I couldn't replace. You wanted me to understand what that feels like. Darius said nothing. My wife called me 14 times, Vincent said. She was outside my gate. She was pregnant. She was in the snow. And she called me 14 times, and I let every call go to voicemail because I was inside my house with your sister. He said it plainly, not as confession for its own sake, but as inventory, as the honest accounting of a man who was through pretending the ledger read differently than it did. You succeeded. I felt it. I felt it, standing on the side of a road, holding an ultrasound photograph at 6 in the morning. You took everything that you wanted to take, Darius. You won the thing you were actually after. Darius's jaw tightened. Something moved through his face, not softening. Nothing so simple as that, but a shift. The slight reorganization of a man who has been ready for a fight and has just been handed the concession he demanded and is now uncertain what to do with his hands. You think saying it out loud to me ends something, Darius said. No, Vincent said. I think saying it out loud to you is just accurate. What ends something is what happens next, and what happens next. You get on that boat, Vincent said, or you don't. Federal units are going to have the pier location inside 20 minutes. I gave them the Pier 7 details specifically, so you'd have a window if you chose to use it. You get on the boat, you go wherever you plan to go, and the records I handed Carla Ose will dismantle what's left of both our operations over the next 18 months. You don't get to rebuild the Serrano network, but I don't keep what I built either. We both lose the Empire version of things. He paused. Or you stay and you go into federal custody and you answer for kidnapping and extortion on top of everything else. And you spend then the next 15 years in a cell like your father did. Darius looked at him for a long time. You're offering me the boat, he said slowly. After everything. I'm telling you it's there. I'm not offering you anything. The choice was always yours. Why? Vincent thought about it. He thought about Naomi in the woods, leaving pieces of her clothing on branches. He thought about her building an escape from a locked room with a cot frame and a key from a frightened young guard. He thought about her, on the other end of a phone call he had not answered, standing in the snow outside a gate he could have opened. Because revenge doesn't make me a better father, he said. And that's the only job I have left that matters. Darius stood on the pier in the February cold and looked at Vincent Carrington, and did the thing that 3 years of planning and fury had not left much room for. He stood there and felt the actual shape of it. Not the narrative he had built. Not the satisfying architecture of a plan executed. The actual shape of what was left when you took the plan away. His father was still dead. His cousin was still dead. And the man in front of him had handed a federal investigator the records that would bury his own empire specifically to keep a pregnant woman off a February lake. He turned to his two men. He said something low and short. They moved toward the boat. Darius looked at Vincent one more time. Plan, he said, for what I'd say to you when we were standing somewhere like this. I worked on it for 3 years. I know, Vincent said. I don't want to say it anymore. I know that too. Darius turned and walked to the boat. Vincent stood on the pier and watched until the boat's running lights disappeared into the dark of the lake. He stood there for a long time after that. Then his phone buzzed. Marcus, she's out. She's okay. He read it 3 times. He was still reading it when he heard the vehicle on the service road behind him, and he turned, and the headlights came on, and the SUV door opened, and Marcus stepped out. And then Naomi stepped out, and Vincent saw her from 50 feet away, saw the cut above her eyebrow, the too large jacket, the way she was holding herself like someone who had been using every available resource for hours and had just run out of the need to. He walked toward her. She watched him come. He stopped 8 feet away, because he did not know what the right distance was, and he was not going to assume. She looked at him. Her face did several things in rapid succession that were all distinct and all real anger, exhaustion, something that might have been relief if relief was allowed to look tired and complicated. You didn't answer, she said. I know. 14 times. I know, Naomi. She pressed her lips together. She looked at the water. Then she looked back at him. Is she in there? She said. In the warehouse. Camille. No, she's at the estate. Naomi nodded slowly. She warned me. Weeks ago. Anonymous message. I didn't know it was her until she stopped. She pressed her hand against her abdomen. The gesture that had become automatic in the last 12 hours, the check, the confirmation. She warned me, and you were the one who didn't. Yes. She knew about the baby before you did. Yes, because I was coming to tell you. And you, she stopped again. She looked down. When she looked back up, her eyes were bright, but her voice was steady. I had the papers with me, the separation papers. I had already rented the house. I was done, Vincent. Before any of this happened, I was already done. He held her gaze. I know. The baby didn't change that. I wasn't coming to fix things. I was coming to tell you the truth and hand you the papers. And leave. I know, he said again, so don't. She pressed her fingers briefly against her eyes. Don't save me and then act like that purchases something. Because it doesn't. You don't get credit for coming after something you should never have let go of in the first place. He stood there and took that. He did not flinch from it, did not manage it, did not try to redirect it into something more comfortable. He just let it land where it was supposed to land. You're right, he said. I need to sit down, she said. I need a doctor. I need to know if the baby's his. Her voice cracked on that. Just slightly. The first crack in everything. He moved forward. He stopped himself halfway. Can I don't touch me yet, she said. He stopped. He moved back. Marcus was already on the phone. Medical team is 3 minutes out, he said. Naomi lowered herself to sit on the hood of the SUV. She was shaking again, the cold and the aftermath of adrenaline and the catching up of everything she had not allowed herself to feel while she was in that room building her way out of it. She pressed both hands against her abdomen and closed her eyes and breathed. Vincent stood 5 feet away and watched, and did not move closer, and did not try to fill the space with words, because there were no words for this, and he was only just beginning to understand that some of the most important things a person can do are the things they do not do. He did not touch her. He did not explain himself. He did not ask for anything. He stood outside her perimeter, and he waited, and that act of waiting, which cost more than anything he had done all night, more than the pier, more than the records he had handed over, more than the empire he had just finished dismantling, by the edge of a winter lake, was the first completely honest thing he had done in years. The medical vehicle arrived. The paramedic who climbed out was a woman named Torres. efficient and calm, and she went directly to Naomi with a kit and a manner that made no assumptions and asked no unnecessary questions. Vincent watched Torres talk to Naomi in a low voice, watched Naomi answer, watched Torres do the initial assessment with the kind of focused competence that was its own form of reassurance. Then Torres held up a small device. Even from 5 feet away, in the cold and the dark on a waterfront surface road in February, Vincent heard it. A heartbeat, fast, rhythmic, determined. The same sound Naomi had heard alone in Dr. Webb's office. The sound that had made her press her hand against the wall of a parking garage and cry the kind of crying that doesn't make noise, that sound. Now, out here, in the cold air between them. Naomi's face collapsed and rebuilt itself in about 4 seconds. She pressed both hands over her mouth. Her shoulders shook once, hard. Torres said something quiet to her. Naomi nodded. Vincent stood very still with his hands at his sides and listened to his child's heartbeat on a pier road in the dark, and understood not as abstraction, not as principle, but as something physical and irreversible that lived in his chest now, exactly what he had almost lost at his, while standing in a firelit room, ignoring a phone. Naomi looked up at him. She did not reach for him. She did not soften. She looked at him with eyes that were wet, and a face that was exhausted and bruised, and more honest than anything he had seen in years. Darius, she said. Where is he gone? Vincent said. Federal units will pick him up within 48 hours. He doesn't get to disappear. She looked at him, reading something in his face. Did you go after him for me? She said. Or did you go after him for you? He thought about the pier, about Darius's boat moving away into the dark, about standing there and not stopping it. I let him go, he said. I gave him a window. He's going into custody alive. Not I didn't do it the other way. Naomi held his gaze. She was reading him the way she had always been able to read him, not the managed version, the actual one. Why? She said, and he said the only thing that was true. Because you warned me, he said, before any of this, in the way you'd been warning me for a year. You told me the Empire was more important to me than you were. You told me I looked through you. You told me I was choosing the wrong things. He stopped. I just finally listened. Naomi looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then Torres said something to her about the hospital, about transport, about the baby needing proper monitoring in a clinical setting, and Naomi turned and stood up from the SUV hood and let Torres guide her toward the medical vehicle. At the door of the vehicle, she stopped and looked back at Vincent. You're not riding with me, she said. I know. I'll tell Marcus where to take you.
Okay.
He watched the door close. He watched the medical vehicle pull away. He stood on the service road with his hands in his pockets, and the lake moving somewhere to his left, and the distant sound of federal units converging on a warehouse that was now empty of what they had come to find. Marcus came to stand beside him. The records Ozzy's has, Marcus said carefully. That's going to move fast. The exposure your attorney, the shell structures, the contacts once that starts unraveling. I know. It could take years. There'll be proceedings. Potential prosecution even with the cooperation. The attorneys will tell you there's no guarantee of. Marcus, Vincent looked at him. I know. All of it. I know what I did tonight. Marcus was quiet. How much did I lose tonight? Vincent asked. Marcus thought about that for a moment, genuinely considered it, the way the question deserved. Everything you built, Marcus said. Vincent looked back at the direction the medical vehicle had gone. Taillights were long gone. The road was dark and empty. Not everything, he said. And then his phone rang. It was Carla Osi. Mr. Carrington, she said, we have a problem. One of the names in the financial records you provided, the political contacts your operation maintained, there are 3 sitting officials in that list. When this hits the news cycle, and it will, it's going to be in the next 12 hours. Your name is going to be the headline. Not Darius Serrano. He had known this was possible. He had done it anyway. Then let it be, he said. You understand that the cooperation agreement doesn't protect you from. Yes, there are no guarantees of immunity at this stage. What you gave me tonight opens Agent Osi. His voice was tired, not defeated, just very, very tired. I have a pregnant wife in a medical vehicle right now who has a cut above her eye and hypothermia, and has had the worst night of her life because of decisions I made over the last 20 years. I understand what I gave you. I gave it to you anyway. If there are consequences for that, I will deal with them when they arrive." He paused. "Do your job." He ended the call. He stood in the February dark on the south waterfront of Chicago, with no empire behind him, no arrangement in front of him, and one direction that mattered. He looked at Marcus. "Which hospital?" he said. Marcus told him. He got in the car. The city moved past the windows at the speed of a man who was no longer running toward something he was building, and was running, instead, toward the only thing that was real, a room in a hospital on the north side, where a woman who had already decided to leave him was being monitored alongside a heartbeat that was 8 weeks old and had survived against the specific weight of everything he had failed to protect it from, the longest night either of them had. The hospital was called Northwestern Memorial, and it smelled the way all hospitals smell: antiseptic and recycled air, and something underneath both of those that was harder to name. The smell of people being kept alive by machinery and attention, and the specific human refusal to stop. Vincent arrived at 11:47 p.m. He did not go in immediately. He sat in the back of the car in the hospital drop-off lane for 4 minutes, which Marcus noted and did not comment on, because Marcus had developed over 11 years of proximity to this man a precise sense of when was the correct offering. Vincent was looking at his hands. They were the hands of a man who had built something large and complicated, and had spent the last 6 hours systematically dismantling it. They did not look different. That was the strange part. He had expected some kind of physical evidence of the night, and there was some. His knuckles were scraped from the pier railing he had gripped. There was a grease mark on his left palm from the car door, but overall, they looked like the same hands. Like hands that had not just handed a federal investigator 20 years of criminal infrastructure. Like hands that had not just stood on a pier and let a man walk onto a boat because revenge was the wrong shape for what came next. He pressed them flat against his thighs. "She said I'm not riding with her," he said. "I know," Marcus said. "She didn't say I couldn't come to the hospital." "No," Marcus agreed. "She didn't say that." Vincent got out of the car. The emergency intake desk was staffed by a woman named Diane, who had the particular efficiency of someone who had processed a great many people in crisis and had learned to move faster than their anxiety. Vincent gave Naomi's name. Diane checked a screen. She told him Naomi Carrington had been admitted to the obstetrics monitoring unit on the 4th floor for observation, and that visiting access was at the patient's discretion. "Has she indicated?" Vincent started. "I don't have that information," Diane said, which probably meant no. He took the elevator to the 4th floor. He found the nurse's station. He gave his name to a nurse named Paul, who had the careful neutrality of someone who had been briefed on a situation and was not going to add commentary to it. Paul said he would check with the patient. Vincent sat down in a chair outside the nurse's station. The chair was blue plastic, the kind with metal legs that flexed very slightly under weight. The hallway smelled like the rest of the hospital. A cart went by. A phone rang somewhere and was answered. The overhead lights were the flat, tireless kind that do not acknowledge time of day. He sat there. He did not check his phone. He did not call anyone. He did not strategize or plan or calculate the next move, because there was no next move that belonged to him right now. There was only the blue plastic chair and the hallway, and the fact that somewhere behind one of these doors, a woman who had already decided to leave him was lying in a bed, being monitored alongside a heartbeat. That was 8 weeks old and had survived the night. Paul came back after 12 minutes. "She'll see you," he said. And then, with the careful neutrality fully intact, room 412. "She asked me to tell you to knock first." Vincent stood up. He walked to 412. He stood outside it. He raised his hand and knocked twice. Not the knock of a man who owned things, not the knock of someone accustomed to doors opening when he wanted them to. 2 talks, the way Naomi had knocked on a warehouse door from the inside, the way she had made herself a person to someone who needed to be reminded. Pause. Then her voice, lower than usual, rougher. "Come in." The room was small and adequately lit and held a bed and 2 chairs and monitoring equipment, and a window that looked out on the city at night. The lights of Chicago spread out against the dark like a thing that did not know or care what had happened to anyone in it that evening. Naomi was in the bed with the head raised so she was half sitting. She had a bandage over the cut above her eyebrow. She had an IV line in her left arm. She was wearing a hospital gown, and her hair was loose, and she looked like someone who had been through something serious and was now on the other side of it and was not yet sure what the other side required of her. She looked at him when he came in, and she did not look away, and she did not arrange her face into anything other than what it was, which was tired and honest and complicated. He stopped just inside the door. "Baby's okay," she said. "Heart beats strong. They want to monitor through the night to be sure. But the doctor said she said it looks good." He let out a breath he had been holding since Pier 7. "Okay," he said. His voice was not entirely steady. He did not try to make it steady. "Sit down," she said. She nodded to the chair closer to the window, not the one beside the bed. He sat in the window chair. They were quiet for a moment. The monitoring equipment made small sounds. The city glittered outside. "Tell me about Camille," Naomi said. He told her all of it. Not the managed version, the actual one. How Camille had come into his life through an introduction he had not adequately scrutinized. How long it had been. What he had told himself it was. What it actually was. He told her about the moment in the sitting room, when he had understood that the woman he had been lying to himself about for 5 months was Darius Serrano's sister, that she had been placed in his life as an instrument of infiltration, and that the information she had provided had been used to take Naomi off a road in a snowstorm. He told it without asking for sympathy, without the particular inflection that men use when confessing things they want to be forgiven for. He told it the way you tell something that is true and that the other person deserves to know, without packaging it for easier receipt. Naomi listened. She watched his face. She asked 2 questions: when did it start, and did Camille know about the kidnapping plan? And both times he answered directly, without hesitation. When he finished, she was quiet for a while. "She warned me," Naomi said finally. "The anonymous message, I got it 5 weeks ago. I didn't take it seriously. I changed my route twice, and then I got busy, and I stopped." She paused. She tried to do the right thing, from inside the wrong thing. "Yes, people do that," Naomi said. "Try to do the right thing from inside the wrong thing. It usually isn't enough." She looked at her hands on the blanket. "What happens to her now? I don't know. Federal investigators will want to talk to her. Whether she cooperated knowingly with the kidnapping, she says she didn't know the plan, that Darius told her it was only about information. I believe her. That's not the same as her being without consequence." "No," Naomi said. "It's not." Another silence. "Warren Shields," Naomi said. Vincent looked at her. "I heard Marcus say his name on the phone in the car," she said. "On the way from the waterfront. He was telling someone to hold Warren at a location. Warren was funneling money to Darius's operation. For 18 months, Darius had something on him personal, about his son. Warren made the decision that protecting his son was worth what he was putting at risk." Naomi processed this. "His son doesn't know?" "I don't think so." "So Warren carried it alone?" "Yes." She pressed her lips together. She was doing what she had always done, not rushing to a verdict, turning it over, looking at the shape of it from different angles. It was one of the things about her that Vincent had stopped noticing, sometime in the last 2 years. He was noticing it now. "You built something," she said, "where the people around you could be leveraged that easily. Where someone could get to your driver through his daughter, could get to your attorney through his son. Where being close to you made people vulnerable." "Yes. That's not just about you being betrayed," she said. "That's about what you created, the gravity of it. The way it pulled everyone in and then made them targets." He did not argue with this. He could not argue with it. It was simply true. Dennis Holt, her driver. He did what he did because they threatened his daughter. "I told him I wouldn't punish him for it." Naomi looked at him. "You mean that?" "Yes. A year ago you wouldn't have." "No," he said, "I wouldn't have." She held his gaze. She was measuring something, not the words, the distance behind the words, the thing that the words were resting on. "What did you give Osi?" she said. Everything. The real financial structure. 20 years of it. What does that mean for you? It means federal proceedings, potential prosecution, even with the cooperation framework. My attorney, the legitimate one. Not Warren, says cooperation agreements at this level typically result in reduced exposure but not immunity. There will be hearings. It could take years. Naomi looked at him steadily. You could lose everything. I already lost everything I built, he said. The minute I handed her that drive. What I'm looking at now is the personal exposure. The legal, which is different. Are you scared? He thought about the question. Turned it over. Yes, he said, but not about the proceedings. Not about what they can take. He looked at the window. At the city. At the lights of a thing that had existed before him and would exist after him without particularly caring either way. I'm scared of this room. Of what happens when you decide what you want to happen next. That's the thing I can't predict or manage or plan around. He looked back at her. That's the only thing that scares me right now. Naomi was quiet. She reached up and touched the bandage over her eyebrow, not adjusting it, just touching it, feeling the edge of it. I want you to understand something, she said, and I need you to hear it without interrupting or trying to respond while I'm still in the sentence. Can you do that? Yes. When I drove to the estate last night, I was not going there to give you a chance. I was not going to ask you to fight for the marriage. I had already done the fighting alone for most of last year, and I was done. Pregnancy didn't change what I had decided. I was going to tell you about the baby because you had a right to know. I was going to hand you the papers because you had a right to sign them. And then I was going to leave. She said it evenly. Not with anger. With the particular precision of someone who has thought a thing through completely and is now stating it as record. What happened afterward, the kidnapping last night, all of it, none of that changes what I had decided. You should know that. I know that, he said. You came to find me. You handed over your operation. You stood on a pier and did whatever you did with Darius. And all of that matters. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. But it does not purchase my forgiveness. It does not cancel what you did. I am not a debt that can be settled. No, he said. You're not. If you walk out of here tonight understanding only one thing, let it be that. Stand it, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. She was looking for the thing behind the words again, the calibration, the sincerity, the absence of performance. Tell me about the papers, she said, the separation papers. In the car. I picked them up from the road. My men found them with the car. Did you read them? Yes. And they were thorough, he said. Fair. You'd thought through everything, the property arrangements, the financial separation, the provision for the child's needs. You'd been planning it carefully. He paused. You'd had help. The legal language was you'd worked with someone. An attorney in Evanston, she said. I've been working with her for 6 weeks. She did good work. Naomi watched his face. You're not going to contest it. It's not my document to contest. You prepared it. If you want to proceed with it, we proceed. Just like that. Just like that. She was quiet. She pulled at a thread on the hospital blanket. She looked at the monitoring equipment. She looked at the window. She looked back at him. Where are the papers now? She said. Mine's inside jacket pocket. Same pocket, where I've been carrying the ultrasound photograph. Something moved across her face. She didn't name it. Give me the photograph, she said. He reached into his jacket. He removed the ultrasound photograph, folded twice, worn at the corners from being handled throughout the night, and he stood up and crossed the room and held it out to her. She took it. Their fingers did not touch. She unfolded it. She looked at it for a moment. The same image she had looked at in Dr. Webb's office, the same sheets pressed against her chest through her coat, while standing out an iron gate in the snow, calling a number that did not get answered. She refolded it. She set it on the table beside the bed. Sit down, she said. He sat back in the window chair. I'm not signing the papers tonight, she said. I'm not signing anything tonight. I'm not making any decisions tonight. I've been kidnapped and I've been cold, and I've been scared in a way I have never been scared before in my life, and I am not going to make decisions about the rest of my life from a hospital bed at midnight. She looked at him directly. That's not a promise. That's not a door opening. You should not hear it as either of those things. I hear it as exactly what you said, he said. The baby changes the logistics, she continued. It doesn't change what you did. There will be co-parenting regardless of what happens between us, and I need you to be capable of that, not as a way back in, but as a separate thing. Its own thing. This child's father, which is a different job than my husband. I understand the difference. Do you? I'm learning the difference, he said. Tonight I started learning it. Naomi looked at him for a long time. The monitoring equipment beep at its regular intervals. The city outside did not change. Go home, she said. Not to the estate. Find somewhere else. The estate has too much of everything wrong in it. She paused. Take Marcus if you need him, but don't surround yourself with the operation. The operation is over. Start being wherever you actually are. Okay. He stood up. He was at the door when she said his name. Vincent. He stopped. He turned. She was looking at him from the bed, and her face had the exhausted, honest look it had been wearing all night, but something else in it now, too. Something that cost her something to let him see. The 14 calls, she said. I'm not going to pretend that it's not going to be the thing I think about for a long time. That I wasn't standing there. She stopped. She pressed her lips together. I need you to know that I know you came, not as credit. Just I know you came. He stood in the doorway and looked at her. Get some rest, he said. I'll be in the hallway. You don't have to, I know I don't have to, he said. I'm going to anyway. He went back to the blue plastic chair outside the nurse's station. He sat down. He sat there through the rest of the night. The days that followed were not clean. Nothing about them was clean. The federal proceedings moved faster than Vincent's attorney had predicted. 3 days after Carla Osi received the drive, the first news cycle broke, and it broke the way these things always broke, which was loudly and incompletely, and with a great deal of confident speculations about things that were not yet fully established. Vincent's name was in every headline. The political connections were in every headline. 3 sitting officials hired their own attorneys within 48 hours. Warren Shields resigned from his practice and retained separate counsel. His son, who had not known any of it, called Vincent from a number. Vincent didn't recognize and said 4 sentences. He knew this was not the time. He wanted Vincent to know his father was not a bad man. He was sorry for what his father had put at risk, and he hung up. Vincent sat with the phone after the call ended and thought about Dennis Holt's daughter and Warren's son and Ray, whose last name he did not know, who had given Naomi a key in a dark building and was now presumably dealing with whatever came next for a person who had done that. He thought about all the people on the edges of what he had built, the ones who had never signed up for any of it and had ended up implicated anyway by proximity. He moved into a rental apartment in Lincoln Park. 2 bedrooms, unremarkable, the kind of place that belonged to no one in particular. He brought nothing from the estate except clothes and a box of personal documents. He did not bring the furniture, the artwork, the particular objects that had accumulated over 20 years of a certain kind of life. He left them there. He did not know what to do with an estate full of things that were purchased with money, that was now the subject of federal examination, and his attorney told him to touch nothing until further instruction, and he didn't. Marcus stayed. Not in the capacity he had held for 11 years. The capacity no longer existed. But Marcus stayed, which meant something, and Vincent accepted what it meant without trying to put language around it. Camille Serrano left Chicago. Federal investigators talked to her twice and determined that her knowledge of the kidnapping plan was not established beyond reasonable doubt, that she had made an attempt, however inadequate, to warn Naomi, and that her cooperation in the early investigation of the Serrano network's financial structure was substantive. She was not charged. She was gone within 2 weeks, and Vincent did not know where she went, and he did not look for that information, because finding it would not have served anything. De Serrano was picked up by federal authorities on Lake Michigan 3 days after the pier. He had not made it as far as he had planned a Coast Guard vessel on a routine patrol, a license check, a name that matched an active warrant. He was returned to Chicago. He was charged with kidnapping, extortion, conspiracy, and a significant list of federal financial crimes reconstructed from the records Vincent had provided. His attorney was good. The case was going to take years. Darius was going to be in a courtroom for a very long time. Vincent did not attend the arraignment. He was asked if he wanted notification of proceedings, and he said yes, send it to his attorney. He did not feel the satisfaction he had once imagined he would feel watching an enemy go into federal custody. He felt something flatter and more honest than satisfaction, the feeling of a thing completed, a chapter closed, with all the ambiguity intact that the word completed did not adequately cover. He did not feel like he had won anything. He went to the Evanston house for the first time 6 weeks after the hospital. Naomi had called him, not texted, called, which meant she had chosen the format deliberately and asked if he could come the following Saturday at 10 in the morning. She said there were things to discuss about the prenatal schedule and the arrangements going forward. She said to come to the front door. He drove himself. No Marcus, no car service. He drove himself in the rental car he had been using since Lincoln Park, which was a gray four-door sedan that had nothing to say about itself, and he parked in front of the house on the tree-lined Evanston Street and sat in it for a moment. The house was modest in the way that things chosen by someone making their own decisions without needing to perform anything are modest. Porch wide enough to sit on, good windows, a garden bed in front that was currently dormant under February that was becoming March. He had not seen it before. He had not known about it until the night it became relevant, which was its own kind of information about how far gone things had been. He walked to the front door. He knocked. He waited. The waiting was different now than it had been the first night at the hospital. That night had been raw, everything immediate and sharp-edged and loaded with the night it was attached to. This waiting was quieter. He was more familiar with it now. 6 weeks of recalibration, having done something to his relationship, with not being in control of outcomes. He had sat outside a hospital room for 6 hours. He had attended a prenatal appointment 2 weeks ago when invited, sat in the waiting room while Naomi went in, and held the door for her when she came out. He had not asked how it went. She had told him voluntarily, briefly, standing on the sidewalk, everything looks good. The doctor said second trimester starts in 2 weeks, and then she had walked to her car and he had walked to his, and neither of them had said anything else, and it had been okay. He was learning the dimensions of okay. The door opened. Naomi was in jeans and a loose sweater, hair pulled back, not dressed for performance, dressed for a Saturday morning in a house that belonged to her. She looked at him with an expression that was not warm and was not cold and was, he had learned in the last 6 weeks, simply her actual face when she was being neither guarded nor open, her resting honest expression. The one he had once known very well and had somewhere along the way stopped seeing. "Come in," she said. He came in. The house smelled like coffee and something baked, maybe toast. It was furnished simply, good furniture chosen carefully, nothing excessive. The kitchen was visible from the front hall. There was a round table near the window with 2 mugs on it. She had made coffee for both of them. He sat at the table. She sat across from him. She wrapped both hands round her mug and looked at him with a calibrating expression. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" "Smaller," she said. "Then, I don't mean that badly. I mean you're not taking up the room the way you used to. You used to walk into a room and rearranged the air in it. You don't do that anymore." He considered this. "Is that a good thing?" "I don't know yet," she said. "Ask me in a year." He almost smiled. He held it back because the moment was not ready for it, and he had become, in the last 6 weeks, very careful about which moments he moved into and which ones he waited for. They talked about the prenatal schedule. She had a doctor she was seeing every 2 weeks now, moving into the second trimester. She was going to continue seeing Dr. Webb for general care and the OB she had started with for the pregnancy specifically. She walked him through the appointment calendar, the dates she was inviting him to attend, and the ones she wanted to keep to herself, and he listened without negotiating, without suggesting adjustments, without any of the particular verbal habits. He had spent 20 years developing the habits of a man who encountered information and immediately began working out how to direct it. He just listened. He wrote down the dates she gave him. When they finished the practical portion, she wrapped her hands around the mug again and looked out the kitchen window for a moment. The backyard was visible through it, small, fenced, a tree in the corner with bare branches. I went back to see Dr. Webb last week, Naomi said. Not for the pregnancy, just as she's someone I've talked to for a long time. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't inside any of this. Good, he said. I told her what happened. The whole thing. She paused. She asked me what I wanted. Not what I thought I should want, or what was practical. What I actually wanted. She looked back at him. I've been thinking about the answer for a week. He waited. I want to not be afraid anymore, she said. I spent the last year afraid. Afraid the marriage was over. Afraid of what came next. Afraid of what it would mean for everything. And then I was literally afraid, in a room in a building, and somehow the literal kind was easier to deal with. 'Cause in that room, I knew what I was afraid of, and I could do something about it. She looked at her hands. The other kind is harder, the kind that lives in ordinary mornings. Yes, he said. I'm not ready to tell you what I want from you, she said. Or if I want anything from you beyond the co-parenting. I'm not there yet. I want you to know that's not. I'm not punishing you. I'm genuinely not there yet. I know, he said. You're not waiting, are you? She said. Like, not waiting in the way where you've decided the outcome, and you're just marking time until I catch up. He thought about the blue plastic chair outside the nurse's station. He thought about the parking lot at the Evanston prenatal office, standing beside his gray sedan. He thought about all the distances he had been maintaining, without being asked to maintain most of them, because the maintaining had started to feel like the right shape of things, not punishment, not penance. Just the correct spatial relationship for where they actually were. I'm waiting in the way where I don't know the outcome, he said. And I've stopped needing to. She looked at him. She held the look for a moment. Then she reached across the table and picked up the folder that had been sitting at the far edge, the one he had not acknowledged, when he sat down, the one he recognized by its thickness and the particular paper color of legal documents. The separation papers. She set them in the center of the table. He looked at them. He looked at her. I haven't signed them, she said. I also haven't decided not to sign them. I pulled them out this week because I needed to look at them and decide what to do. She touched the edge of the folder without opening it. I wrote them because I needed to know I could leave, that I had the capacity and the plan and the ability to go. I needed to know that before anything else. And now I know it, she said. It's not the knowing doesn't go away. I know I can leave. I know I have this house and my plans and my life that I built separately from you. That doesn't change, regardless of what I decide about the folder. She did not open the folder. She did not slide it toward him. She picked up her coffee mug. My mother called me last week, she said. She asked about the baby. I told her things were. I said things were complicated. She said complicated is the only kind of real there is. A pause. She's 71, and she's been married to my father for 43 years, and she said that to me. Complicated is the only kind of real there is. She's right, he said. She usually is, Naomi said. That's the most irritating thing about her. This time the moment was ready. He smiled. Small, brief, not asking anything from it. She looked at him when he did it. She did not smile back. But something in her face, did not her mouth, something lower, something that had more to do with recognition than warmth. She knew that smile. She had known it for a long time. The estate, she said. What are you doing with it? My attorney says I can't transfer or dispose of anything until the federal review is further along. After that, I don't know. I'm not going back to live there. Good, she said. The Lincoln Park apartment. It's fine. It's enough. Is Marcus with you? He comes by. He's figuring out what his life looks like now the same way I am. He has options. He'll be fine. He's a good man, Naomi said. He is. She was quiet for a moment. She looked out the kitchen window again. The bare tree. The gray sky of an almost March morning. I've been talking to a therapist, she said, since I got out of the hospital. 3 times a week. She said it simply. Not as confession, not as information. She was offering for his approval or his comment. Just as fact. She's helping me understand what the last 2 years actually were, as opposed to what I was telling myself they were. That sounds useful, he said. It is. She paused. She asked me to describe what I wanted the next 5 years to look like. I said I wanted to be someone my child could look at and understand what it meant to survive something and not become bitter from it. She touched the edge of the folder again. I'm working on that. That's a good thing to be working on, he said. She also asked me what I would need from you to co-parent. Effectively, Naomi said. Not what I wanted from you, what I'd need. I told her I'd need you to be honest. Not performing honesty, actually honest, which is different and which you were never. She stopped. Reconsidered. You were honest in certain ways. You were honest about the empire. You were honest about what you were and what you'd built and what it required. You were honest about all of that. You were not honest about what you were doing to us. No, he said. I'd need that to be different. It is different. She looked at him. How do I know that? You don't, he said. Not yet. That's not a thing that can be told. It's a thing that accumulates. He set his coffee mug down. You watched me sit in a chair outside your hospital room for 6 hours. You watched me show up to a prenatal waiting room and sit in it and not ask you questions about what happened inside. Those are small things. I understand they're small. I'm not pointing to them as evidence of transformation. I'm pointing to them as the only thing I know how to do right now is show up in the right size for whatever the moment is. Not larger than it. Not trying to control what it means. She was quiet for a moment. You knocked on my door today, she said. Yes. You didn't use the car with the driver. You didn't bring Marcus. You didn't call ahead to verify the address or check the timing. You just came. Yes. She turned her coffee mug slowly in her hands. She was looking at it, but she was thinking about something else. Last night, she said, I had a dream about the gate. The iron gate at the estate. I was standing outside it the way I stood outside it that night, and you were inside, and your phone was ringing. And in the dream you looked at it, and you answered it. She paused. And I woke up, and I didn't know what to do with that. Whether it was what I wanted or just the mind working something through. He did not fill the silence. She looked up at him. I'm not ready, she said. I want to be clear about that. I am not ready, and I don't know when I will be, and I am not going to tell you something comforting, just because we're sitting at a table together and you've been patient for six weeks and the coffee is warm. I know, he said, but I'm not signing those papers today, she said. He looked at the folder in the center of the table. Okay, he said. That's all it is, she said. I'm not signing them today. It doesn't mean I hear you, he said. It doesn't mean anything, except what you said. Today, papers, not signed. She held his gaze. Then she stood up and picked up the folder and set it on the counter behind her, with its back to the room. She picked up her coffee mug, and she stood by the kitchen window and looked out at the bare tree. You can stay for a while if you want, she said. I was going to make eggs. He looked at the back of her shoulders, her hair, the way she stood at the window in her own house on a Saturday morning in almost March, looking out at a tree that was still bare but would not always be. Yeah, he said. I'd like that. She got out the pan. He stayed at the table. She did not ask him to help, and he did not offer, because the kitchen was hers and he was just in it, and some distances are the right distance. He sat at the table with his coffee, and he listened to the sound of the pan on the burner and the sound of the refrigerator and the sound of a Saturday morning in a house that had been built out of Naomi's own certainty that she would be okay. Without him, and he understood that this specific thing, this exact moment was worth more than anything he had built in 20 years. Not because she had forgiven him, because she was still in the world, because the heartbeat was still there, because she was making eggs in her kitchen on a Saturday, and she had said he could stay for a while. That was what he had. That was enough to start with. Months passed. The federal proceedings moved in the slow, grinding way that federal proceedings move. There were hearings and continuances and motions and long stretches where nothing visible happened, and then short stretches where several things happened simultaneously. Vincent's attorney managed the process with the particular competence of someone who understood that the goal was not victory but navigation getting through, with the minimum damage consistent with the choices that had already been made. He was not prosecuted. The cooperation agreement held, more or less. There were fines. There were restrictions. There was an extended period of monitored compliance that was going to last several years. He was not going to prison, which his attorney said, with the careful inflection of someone who wanted credit for an outcome they had worked very hard to produce. Vincent received this news on a Tuesday afternoon in April, sitting in his attorney's office on the 42nd floor of a building in the Loop, and he said, "Thank you," and he meant it. And then he drove back to Lincoln Park and called Naomi. She answered on the third ring. "No charges," he said. "Cooperation agreement holds a pause." "That's good news," she said. "For the baby's sake. Having you available." "Yes," he said. "Are you okay?" she said. He thought about the question. He turned it over the way she turned things over. "I'm relieved," he said. "And I don't know the right word. Empty, maybe. The way that you're empty after something you've been carrying is finally set down." "That's not the worst thing to feel," she said. He said, "It's not." A pause. "I'll see you Saturday," she said. Prenatal appointment. He had been to 5 of them, now. He sat in the waiting room. He held the door. Twice she had come out and told him things: the baby's weight, the results of a test, the timeline of what was coming. Once she had shown him a photograph from the ultrasound. Saturday said, "I'll be there." She said goodbye. He said goodbye. The call ended. He sat in the parking structure for a while. The day came in September, which was a Thursday, which was not a day Vincent would have predicted, but which felt, afterward, like the only day it could have been. He got the call from Marcus, who had been at the hospital with Naomi, since that morning not in the room, but available because Naomi had asked him to be there in case logistics needed to be managed. He drove to the hospital in 17 minutes. He had not broken any traffic laws, but he had been paying very little attention to traffic laws. He found Marcus in the waiting area on the labor and delivery floor. Marcus stood up when he came in and said, "She's okay." Both of them are okay. And then Marcus, who had been with Vincent for 11 years, and had never once, in those 11 years, made a gesture that could be described as sentimental, put his hand briefly on Vincent's shoulder. Just for a moment. Then he stepped back. Vincent sat down. He waited for 2 hours. The waiting was different from any other waiting he had done. It had its own character, large, quiet, beyond his ability to act on, in any direction. He sat with it, and it sat with him. At 4:32 in the afternoon, a nurse came and said Naomi was asking for him. He walked down the hall. He opened the door. She was in the bed, tired, in a way that was entirely distinct from any tiredness he had seen before, the specific exhaustion of someone who had done something enormous with their body and was now on the other side of it. Her hair was damp. Her face was the most unguarded he had seen it in over a year. She was holding a small person wrapped in a white blanket. She looked up when he came in. She did not say anything. She looked at him with her honest, unguarded, exhausted face, and then she looked down at the small person, and then she looked back at him. He walked to the side of the bed. He stopped where she could tell him to stop. She shifted the baby slightly, angling the small wrapped bundle toward him. "Come here," she said. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed. She put the baby in his arms. He took the weight of the small person with both arms and looked down at a face that was new to the world, that had not yet had time to become anything other than what it was, new and complete, and asking nothing and offering, in its simple fact of existing, the specific argument that life makes for itself when all other arguments have run out. He looked at the baby for a long time. He looked up at Naomi. She was watching him. Her face had something in it, now that was not the calibrated expression, not the honest but guarded expression, not any of the versions he had cataloged in the last months. It was something older and simpler and more fundamental than any of those. She was watching a man hold his child for the first time. "Hi," he said, to the baby. His voice was not steady at all. The baby's face did the thing that newborn faces do, the small movements that are not yet expressions, but are the precursors to them. Naomi reached across and laid her hand over his, not taking the baby, just resting her hand over his. He looked at her hand. He looked at her face. It doesn't mean everything is fixed, she said quietly. I know, he said. It means we're here, both of us. For this. She left her hand where it was. He held his child. The window of the room showed the city in September afternoon light, golden and indifferent and permanent in the way that cities are permanent, outlasting all the specific human difficulties transacted within them. Chicago had seen everything. It would see more. In an Evanston house that belonged to Naomi, the door was still hers to open or not open. In a Lincoln Park apartment that belonged to nobody in particular, a man was learning to occupy the correct amount of space. Between them, an arrangement that was not forgiveness and was not repair, and was not the old thing reconstructed. Something different. Something that had no name yet because it was too new. The baby breathed in his arms. Vincent held on.